All right, Lee Stoltzfus, Dr. Lee Stoltzfus. Thank you so much for doing this again, my friend. It's been a while.
Hey, my pleasure, Marty. Good to see you again.
Yes, good to see you. People should know that you have your PhD, which I think is important just because it gives some credibility, right? But you have your PhD in clinical psychology.
Correct, yes.
And the topic that we're going to discuss today is leadership, because this is something you do. You have your practice, your clinical practice, which you were talking about is more of a part-time thing at this point, and now you're focusing more on executive coaching. Right. And the topic that we're talking about is servant leadership. So I wanted to ask you, what is servant leadership?
Yeah. Okay, that's a great question. Let me give you a definition, a short definition for your audience, and this is from greenleaf.org. Servant leadership is a philosophy and set of practices that relies and enriches the lives of individuals, builds better organizations, and ultimately creates a more just and caring world.
Okay. Yeah. So can you give an example of what is like some examples of servant leadership?
I'll do that. Let me give you a little bit more information on this quote, if I may.
Yeah.
You probably are wondering, well, who the heck is the Greenleaf organization? I'm glad you asked. Robert K. Greenleaf is the modern beginning of servant leadership. So he wrote a seminal treatise, if you will, back in 1970. And he was an executive, a vice president actually with AT&T, and he had studied leadership for a long time and was a leader. And so this was his conclusion, is that the best type of leadership is servant leadership. Your audience might want to just go to the greenleaf.org and read a little bit more about servant leadership there. So, and if I can talk a little bit more about what servant leadership is again, and I'll get to your question about give me some examples and so on. So, I think this is really fascinating. In the traditional organization, you've got the traditional corporate pyramid with the board of directors, CEO at the top of the pyramid, and then underneath that you've got the C-suite folks and the middle managers and the lower managers and supervisors, and then finally you've got the people, the workers at the bottom. And supposedly in that model, everybody from the bottom keeps serving the folks above them. In servant leadership, you take the pyramid and you turn it upside down, so that the people, the board of directors and the CEO serve the next level, and the next level serves, and so on. So you're really focusing on the people that are doing the work at the bottom, and then ultimately, if they're doing a great job and they're happy and they're productive, who's going to benefit? The client, the customer, the public, the world, if you will. So that's it's a really interesting way to look at leadership.
Absolutely.
As opposed to some CEOs say, well, let's make the board of directors happy. Let's have great numbers and create lots of revenue. That's not bad, and servant leadership doesn't negate that at all. But this says if you make the people at the bottom and each layer happy and fulfilled, then you're going to really be serving the client and the customer and the public and the world most effectively.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's a lot of companies that are following that sort of model now, and I can tell from my last employer, they make a good workspace, I think, is one of the ways that the top kind of serves the rest of like serving from the top down, so to speak. Because if you have happy employees, that is extremely beneficial to your clients and to your customers.
You got it. Absolutely.
So it makes total sense what you're saying.
And because some people, when they think about servant leadership and that everybody's serving folks lower than them, they think, well, that's the inmates running the prison or running the asylum. But it's really not. It's actually empowering everybody in the organization to be the very best they can be and to have success.
Yeah, that makes sense, because like traditionally, just thinking about it from a standard model of CEO and then C-suites and then middle managers and then top down, if you're only focused on like the bottom line, the employees, from my experience, can just do the bare minimum without getting fired, sort of mentality. But if you're serving from like this servant leadership perspective, it just seems like you're trying to help each other, and then leading to the people who are actually doing the work, making them feel special, making them feel important, like giving them some stocks in the company or things like that, having some ownership and stake in the game.
Interesting you bring up stock, because a number, not all, but a number of really outstanding companies that are using servant leadership are employee owned. A significant percentage of those, which I think, and a lot of them have resisted going public because they feel they would lose that esprit de corps, that energy, that positive vibe, if you will.
Interesting. Okay. What are some examples of servant leadership?
Okay. So let me give you. I keep ducking your question here, but bear with me. What I wanted to say was that in servant leadership, there's two different aspects in an organization. There's the strategic direction, the mission, the vision, the values, the goals, etc. And the executives do not abdicate responsibility for that. They still maintain that. But in terms of operational aspects and delivery of the service, that's where they become servant leaders to empower the employees and everyone in the organization. So let me give you some. You were asking about examples. Let me give you some historic examples, if I may, of who's a servant leader. These are individuals, but they many times had organizations as well. So particularly in this kind of current period of emphasizing equity and inclusion and social justice, you think of Abraham Lincoln, who had a real desire to bring equality and freedom to all people in the United States, and to keep the nation together. He could have said, "Hey, you Southerners, you can have your own, become your own nation. The North will be its own nation." But he had a vision of keeping the country together and freeing everyone. Another historic example would be Mother Teresa, and she had an organization of Catholic sisters in India and in Calcutta, particularly that fed and clothed and helped the health of the poor. An interesting story about her, Marty, is that when she got the Nobel Peace Prize, they normally have a big festive dinner and celebration, and she said, "No, I want you to take that money and give it to the poor, not to just celebrate me." Some contemporary illustrations of who might be a servant leader. Bono of YouTube, he's raised, or of U2, I should say, not YouTube. He has raised millions, hundreds of millions of dollars for humanitarian relief around the world.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, he's a mover and a shaker in that. And then probably one of the best known right now would be Bill and Melinda Gates.
Their foundation.
Yeah, their foundation. They employ over 400 people full time, and they give $1 billion. That's with a B, $1 billion a year away around the world for vaccinations, clean water, healthcare in poor countries around the world. So those are some individual examples of servant leadership for sure. And then in terms of the corporate world, let me give you a little bit of illustration on that. There's a number of well-known, well-known companies. So Starbucks is a really good example of that. They, in their writings, they say that we're a culture of belonging, inclusion, and diversity. And they hold the view that, quote, how you treat your people is how they will treat your customers. So, what we've been talking about here definitely has a bottom line impact when you're a servant leader. Mm-hmm. Another great example would be Southwest Airlines. Herb Keller's the founder, but the president for many years was Colleen Barrett. She's now president emeritus, and she says our culture, our entire philosophy of leadership is quite simple: treat people right, and good things will happen. So, yeah, another example might be the Container Store. I think most of your viewers and listeners are familiar with the Container Store, and they're committed to conscious capitalism, which is a very related concept to servant leadership. That conscious capitalism emphasizes that the organization is concerned about the welfare of people and of the environment. So all inclusive. In the manufacturing, distribution of their products, etc., they want to be concerned and aware of how it impacts the world in terms of the people and the environment.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So those are some examples.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How did you get interested in this subject?
Great question. And what I'd like to say is that years ago, when I was in graduate school doing my PhD in clinical psych at the Graduate School of Psychology at Fuller Seminary in Pasadena, I had an excellent mentor. I was really fortunate and blessed to have Dr. H. Newton Maloney as my mentor. So Dr. Maloney was just one of these guys that was boundless energy and always helping and giving and supporting others, and particularly all of his mentees and students.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, so he inspired me, and I can remember a number of times going into him. In fact, once I was like stumped on a project and a paper and all this, and I had my notes, and he says, well, let's talk. So we talked, and he said, hey, let me get on my, then they had typewriters, no computers. This is back in the 70s. So he said, let me get on my typewriter. So he said, now what's that? And he actually typed out an outline. He said, here you go. Go write that paper.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So kind of his helpfulness in the way that he approached teaching and mentoring and leadership inspired you.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Inspired me to do the same for other people. And actually what happened, I mean, he and I developed a real good friendship. And what I can mention is, if your listeners and viewers want to go to my website, LeeStoltzfus.com, they'll see an article on there called Turbocharging Your Gratitude. And I write about this. So what happened when Newt retired, they put out a notice, hey, anybody who wants to write a letter of appreciation or gratitude for him, do that. And he got like 400 letters.
Wow.
And I was one of them, and I happened to run into him later, and I told him about all the ways he had helped me, including giving me my first job and helping me speak at the California Psych Association and blah, blah, blah. And he said my letter was one of the top 3 or 4 that he got. So I loved it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. So that's another part of servant leadership. The servant leader is helping those he helps or she helps to become servants as well. So that it kind of like, pass it along, pay it forward.
Yeah. It like perpetuates the cycle in a very good way.
You got it. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. We're talking about leadership, and this is a question that I'm not sure is super relevant, but like other forms of leadership, it seems like servant leadership is probably, in my mind, sounds like one of the best ways to go. Mm-hmm. But like, what other categories of leadership are there in the leadership sphere?
Yeah, I'm glad you're asking that question. There's a whole, you can go on, Google it, and you can find 8 to 12 different types of leadership, including autocratic, which is pretty much more almost borders on dictatorial.
I see.
Where it's do as I say, do it now, I'm the boss, jump to it. So that would be on one end of the extreme. Then a little bit less than that is authoritarian or authoritative, where the person is the leader based upon his or her expertise and knowledge and so on. Mm-hmm. What else would be under there? There's also transactional leadership, which is if you do this, I'll do that. You'll get this paycheck, or you'll get this bonus or this reward. So it's based upon what the leader can do for his or her followers.
Yeah.
There's also then democratic leadership, where pretty much, it's what it means is everybody gets a say and a vote, and it's very egalitarian, if you will. On the far end from autocratic or dictatorial would be laissez-faire, just, very little direction or supervision. Here's what we're up to. Just go and do it, and you don't get much input, support, guidance, direction, et cetera.
Interesting.
So what I like about there's another one that I should talk about definitely is transformational leadership. So transformational leadership is where the leader the goal is to transform the output of the organization, the goals, the vision, and perhaps the people. So a good example of transformational leadership, classic one, is John F. Kennedy, who said in the early 60s, before he was very unfortunately assassinated, was we're going to put a man on the moon and bring him back by the end of the decade, which actually happened. 1969 was that time. So he was a transformational visionary leader. But one of the cool things about servant leadership is it's not just a technique. It emphasizes coaching, listening, empathy, empowerment, values, all these sorts of things. So you can take servant leadership and apply it, particularly in something like transformational leadership. So in order to transform the end result or the product, you empower and you serve the people that are going to do that. So how's
Very
that sound? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
But when you were talking about different types of leadership, it's almost similar to different types of governments and the way that they run their country.
Absolutely.
North Korea being like a dictatorship.
Yeah.
And then maybe on the far end of that, opposite end of that would be like the Scandinavian countries, Norway and Sweden and these types of countries. So would you say like servant leadership is more... if you were to compare them, would be more like a Swedish or Scandinavian type?
Perhaps, yeah. Where there's more consciousness of empowering and helping everyone achieve their highest good, if you will.
Yeah, because I had read somewhere or heard this, that there's actually a happiness index to measure the almost like a GDP of happiness.
Right.
And those Scandinavian countries are just like blowing like way off the charts in terms of the quality of life that people live and the mental health and all that good stuff. Does that sound familiar to you?
Oh yeah, I'm familiar with some of that data and that research.
So when you're talking about servant leadership, it makes sense that if you're trying to do it from the top down and really focusing on, say, for example, like the community that you live in and empowering those people, you're just going to keep on like perpetuating that, because good energy is contagious and so is bad energy. I mean, I'm sure like the vibe in North Korea is like felt very heavy. And direct opposite to that, I'm feeling like more like a light feeling, happy, energetic and normal way of being when you're in the Scandinavian countries. And I've experienced that even like in Amsterdam. It's really like, I wouldn't say necessarily Scandinavian country, but kind of. It's like up there. It's almost up there. And it's good vibes for sure. Like people are doing their thing. But then I was in Russia and Moscow, and just at the airport for a layover. And you can tell like just the energy of the people in the airport is really heavy, like the workers and things like that, compared to the one in Amsterdam. So very different vibes, and you can tell that leadership plays a big role in philosophy in those countries. Big
contrast. Just a little trivia tidbit I heard years ago. Of course, it's a different situation now, but before we had cell phones and computers and all that, we had telephone books. Remember, you got to look up the number, the name, and all. So I think this was about in the year 2000. If you were in Moscow and you wanted a new phone book, you put in an order, and you got the new phone book 10 years later.
Efficient.
Yeah, right.
Accurate info.
Yeah, talk about depressing and oppressive.
Yeah, depressing and oppressive. Yeah, so thank God we live where we do. It's
amen.
It's a good country. Yeah,
you bet.
What impact does servant leadership have on the people who practice it? Because it seems, just thinking about it, like people would feel very empowered and feel good about themselves when practicing that.
That's a fascinating part about servant leadership. There's some research now from peer-reviewed journals, and I think it'll continue to grow, that shows that people employees who work in a servant leadership organization have a lot of benefits. They have less stress. They tend to be emotionally happier and more balanced. And so personally and in terms of their health, they probably are benefiting.
Yeah.
But beyond that, some really cool things, Marty, is that some of these employees report that they're better at home. They don't come home as tired, and because they've been cared for in a positive way at work, they have energy to care for their kids, for their spouse, for their partners, etc. So there's an impact on the families as well. But even beyond that, some of the research indicates they're better citizens. They are more involved in their community, in social organizations, service clubs, church, etc.
Wow, that's a huge impact.
Yeah.
Like we're saying, like I was saying, the contagious energy that's transferred from the workplace to their family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, talk about having a positive impact.
Right.
That's really amazing stuff.
It is, and that's one of the big reasons I really love servant leadership, because to me it makes sense financially, but it makes sense on the human level, on the relational level.
Yeah.
And it because it does emphasize values and mission, and it's based upon that everyone has the right to be fulfilled. So I think it's a method by which more people in the world of work, and most of us have to go to work and make a living, can benefit. And so it just mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, it makes sense to me. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I think we'll close with that. Lee, didn't have any more questions. Did you have anything else that you wanted to share?
Well, yeah. What I'd like to say is, for your viewers, if they want to know more about servant leadership, they want to know more about what I do, go to my website, leestoltzfus.com. And you'll find information. You'll see some of my blogs. You can sign up for further free information, for my newsletter, etc. And I would love to connect with your viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put a link in the description.
Great.
On the YouTube video, so people just really easily click. But thank you, Lee. It was good
Hey, this has been
up.
great, Marty. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, same
Thanks
here.
so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.